All right, we'll go ahead and take it away. Welcome to today's ULCT webinar. The Utah League of Cities and Towns represents the 255 cities and towns in Utah with a strong, unified voice. We operate on the principles of respect, collaboration, and outcomes. We urge state leaders to respect the role of local government as we respect their role as a state government, and ask them to collaborate with local leaders to achieve desirable outcomes for all of Utahns. ULCT provides information, training, technical assistance, and advocacy to our local officials on municipal issues. You can learn more about ULCT on our website, and we appreciate you being here today. Today's webinar is Understanding Member Contributions to the Tier 2 Hybrid System and Post-Retirement Employment. We're joined by Corey Cox, who is the Director of Legislative and Government Affairs for the Utah Retirement Systems, and he's going to be walking us through all of the recent retirement changes from this most recent legislative session. On this webinar, you'll see that there's both a chat box and a Q&A box. We're going to ask that you use the Q&A box if possible to enter your questions. And just a note that Corey's presentation is pretty on the briefer side. We wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for questions. And so we are going to let Corey deliver his presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end to answer all of your questions. So if you ask a question and we don't immediately answer it, just know that we're saving it for the end to tackle all of the questions at once. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Corey. Corey, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Molly. I appreciate the introduction there. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so you guys can all see what I'm going to be going over. I wanted to kind of just go over a bunch of information that I know we've shared at URS with many employers throughout the state. But I also wanted to make sure that I'm answering some questions that I've actually gotten that I've received over the last few weeks since a lot of this information's kind of become finalized with the legislative session. But I first just want to kind of show you, over the last several years, you can see kind of where things are headed as far as how well-funded URS is. Things are changing just slightly from some of the preliminary numbers that I've seen regarding how well-funded URS is over the next, or how well-funded we are. As of the year end of 2022, we're right there, or 2023, excuse me, right there, 90, 95, 96% funded. We look at the green chart there, the green line there on our chart to come up with our contribution rates. And so this is an important piece that we really look at. As you all may be aware also, we have been in the process of implementing what we call a contribution rate management plan. And as we become more fully funded, and like you can see the trajectory that I just showed you, it's going up, right? From 2008, when the Great Recession occurred, 2012 is kind of our catch up for this because we smooth out those years of our earnings on the green line. The blue line's kind of end of year snapshot of our funding. And we're looking better, and we want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence, being good fiduciaries, and making sure that you receive what you're due in the long run. Because we're looking ahead, down the road, and we're seeing if we keep things where they're at, there may come a point in time where we're going to be really, really well funded. We put in place a few measures back in 2010 to make sure that there was some funding that was going to occur to catch up what we lost in 2008, right? And so as we become more fully funded, we wanted to make sure that there were some things in place to make sure we were giving your money back in a timely manner as things developed, right, over time. And we want to be prudent about it. So we don't have to recapture that funding down the road, right? So what we looked at, because we're seeing a huge drop off in the need for contribution rates here in the next decade or so as we become more fully funded. And we wanted to make sure we're, again, being good fiduciaries, being sound with the money, but also making sure we're not overcharging. So what we did is we developed this contribution rate management plan that looks at a couple different factors. If we, hit a certain funding ratio, if we're really close to getting to 100% funding, if our contribution rate went up or went down, excuse me, the amount that we need to pay for our fund to maintain our funding, if that went down, the contribution rate changed from prior year, and then also what our margin is of what we're charging and what we need um, is big enough, then we can, give some money back. And over the last, I mean, that way we're not necessarily getting a cliff, but there's somewhat of a smooth way of decreasing those contribution rates over time, right? And so what we've done, and you probably have seen this chart. I know this is really hard to read right now, but what we've done is we've actually, over the last few years, I think this is the second one for local governments. We've decreased rates for the public employee system. I think this is the first year for public safety for some of the systems, depending on which risk pool you're in. So, depending on which one you're in, there is a decrease in some of those rates by 0.5% or 1%. And then our firefighters are really well funded. They've got some other funding mechanisms in place to decrease those even further. So that's going down by 2% this next year. There was one risk pool because of what I'm going to show you here in just a minute, the pay increases and whatnot that we were seeing over the last 10 years. Fund 49, the Division B with 2.5% COLA, that did go up slightly, 0.29%. But for the most part, most of you are going to see some decreases in your contribution rate for tier one and even tier two employees. It's the amortization cost. This is the cost that's used to make up the difference of what we lost back in 2008, and make sure that we're getting back to full funded status here. And so it's this yellow line that's going down, this yellow column that amount is going down. Okay. So that's tier one. And then if there is an amortization rate that is paid, which firefighters don't have right now, there is an amortization rate that is paid. It is corresponding in tier two as well. Okay. So all of your employees are affected by these decreases, or actually your budgets are affected by these decreases. So that's a good thing. Okay. Now, you've probably also seen the tier two rates, and I know there's been a lot of talk about this. If you've gone to our employer trainings, if you came to my webinar on March 28th, you probably are fully aware. We send out emails, but you're probably fully aware of the contribution rate changes that are occurring. This is going to be the first year, beginning July 24th, that there will be an employee cost for those in the tier two hybrid public employee hybrid system. The rates increased to 10.7%, and that, I will say, is not related at all to tier one. Okay, this is what the normal cost of the benefit is going up. Okay, so there's an amortization piece that's helping pay down the tier one unfunded liabilities. The tier two costs are increasing, and I'll tell you why here in just a minute. But so this is the first year that that's going to happen. And the reasoning for these increases is because we had to make some assumption changes due to seeing a significant increase in salaries in our experience, which do take effect in the fiscal year of 2025. You saw this also with public safety. As many of you are probably well aware, the public safety costs went up significantly. The pay went up significantly over the last several years, last couple of years especially. Um, so that's what this is what's happening there. That's going up an additional 2.14%. And that is an employee cost unless the employer opts to pick up that cost. Okay. So that is something that I'll just highlight here in just a minute. I'm going to kind of talk through each of these just briefly. Again, one of the big assumptions that we had to make, whoops, that's kind of going into this, these costs is that there was salary growth, and we have to adjust some of our assumptions as we project out what's needed in our reservoir, in our fund, right? To make sure we have enough money in there. And a lot of it, and we're seeing this actually this year too. Some of the preliminary numbers look like we're seeing a consistent increase across the board in 2023 even, that kind of aligns itself with these increases again. But you can see in the blue boxes, that's the prior experience study. That was from 2010 to 2020, basically. So January 1st of 2010 to December 31st of 2019. You can see there what the increases were for each of the systems. The local government, um, public safety, and firefighters are probably what you're going to be paying attention to there. Last experience study, the average increases were 4%, 4.2%, 4.1% at that point in time. For us, going forward, we had to make a different assumption because of what we're seeing over this last 10 years. And we're actually projecting that there's going to be some good increases over the next few years as well, right? But you can see the average went up from 4% to 5.4, 4.2 to 6.6, 4.1 to 5.5. And again, this year, I think it was an average of 8% for local government, 9% for public safety, 10% for firefighters, or somewhere right around there in 2023 as well. So we're seeing these increases, and so our assumptions, we have to make sure that we're going to have enough money in our reservoir again to make up that difference for those assumptions. So it's important for us to do this. So that's the reason behind what's happening. One thing you do need to know with the public employee hybrid plan, and you probably are already aware of this. I know I'm probably reiterating some information that you already know. During the last legislative session, there was a proposal that would have allowed employers to pick up the public employee hybrid contribution rates. That did not pass. That bill did not pass. And so that option is prohibited because that's how it's written in statute. So you'll need to make sure that your payroll is set up for the withholding of the 0.7% for each of the tier 2 hybrid members, beginning on the pay period that ends on or after July 1st of 2024. Just so you're aware, this is an after-tax contribution by the member, okay? So you're going to have the taxes withheld, and then you're going to make the contribution. Good news is if it's an after-tax contribution, right, when the time comes to pay out the benefit, that portion of the pension benefit, albeit it will be probably small at that time, will still be paid out tax-free. So there is some benefit to this. It kind of works similar to, what you may know of as like a Roth account, like a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA. This will work similar to that, right? A couple of things that we've talked extensively about. A couple of other things that you probably have been talking with other cities about, right? What are you going to do? What can you do? Okay, I've heard a lot of different options that have been proposed. First of all, do nothing. I mean, there is that option, and there are some cities that are taking that approach. I know from what I've heard, counties are taking that approach. There are some cities and counties that are doing that. There are some agencies that are doing salary increases for their employees. I mean, I think we've talked about what the state is doing. The state opted to enhance the salaries of each of their tier 2 members by 0.7%, which is that rate of the member contribution. It covers most of the cost for those tier 2 members that work for the state of Utah, and they're covering for both their hybrid and DC or 401k option employees, right? Those that chose that 401k option. There are some agencies that are looking at doing 401k contributions. I've heard those are the big ones that I've heard of. There are some other options that you could look at as well, but those are the big ones: salary increases, 401k contributions. One of the things that you need to be aware of, and I know this is probably a big question on your minds, is, well, what happens if the pickup is approved down the road? What if we can do a pickup like we're doing with our public safety employees, right? Something that you just need to be aware of, and this is coming from some IRS guidance that's out there. And if you just Google employer pickup, um, you know, for retirement plans, you can find this. You can type in the employer pickup contributions to benefit plans, right? But if you do a salary enhancement, just something to be aware of is that you may not be able to reduce this in the future if the legislature allows for that pickup option. So I know some agencies that we've talked to have said, hey, what if we do like for this year, pay them that extra 0.7%, and then we can reduce it next year if this pickup option's available. And then we can use that to pick up the benefit for them, right? The IRS kind of says, hey, wait a minute, that you got to be really careful with that. Um, and I'm going to quote straight from what they're saying. Contributions to a retirement plan that come from salary reduction amounts are subject to FICA. Okay. The Internal Revenue Code indicates that a salary reduction occurs if the amounts shown as wages are less than they would have been but for the contribution. In order for contributions to be considered paid by the employer and therefore not subject to FICA, the employer contributions, one, must be a salary supplement and not a salary reduction. In other words, the employer must not reduce employee salary to offset the amount designated as employee contributions. The amounts that would have been included in wages for FICA tax purposes, but for the employee contribution, are determined based on the facts and circumstances that determine the employee's compensation under the overall employment relationship. If the circumstances indicate that the wages are equal to what they otherwise would have been, but for the contribution, then the amounts are not included in FICA wages. If the facts and circumstances indicate that the contributions reduced or offset the wages paid, they would not meet the test, and the contributions to the plan would be included in FICA wages. Okay. If the employer pays the contributions in addition to salary increases that are consistent with historical norms, this is an indication that they are not paid in lieu of present or future salary and are not included in wages for FICA purposes. So just something to be aware of in all this is that if there is a salary reduction to do that pickup, they could potentially be subject to FICA taxes. What I'd suggest, if this is something you're looking at to do a salary enhancement and then maybe looking at it in the future to take it back so you can do the pickup, you may want to really talk to your legal counsel about that to see if this is something that they may want to do. Okay. Or if this is something that you can do. But the guidance is pretty strict on that. Okay. From what I'm seeing. One of the other questions that I've heard over the last few weeks is, hey, can we give a salary increase just to those in the hybrid plan? I tell you, just be careful. You may want to seek your legal counsel on that. Seek some counsel from from your attorneys on that, just to make sure that you're doing what's right. But let me just give you a kind of a similar example. Okay. When they allowed for pickups to occur, when the legislature allowed for pickups to occur back in 2020, This is what was put into statute. I know it relates directly to the Tier 2 Public Safety and Firefighter Fund, which does allow the pickups. But they said, hey, if you are making a contribution on behalf of your employees to the hybrid plan to pick up the contribution, right? You need to give an equal contribution to those that chose the defined contribution option to their 401k. So if you're doing right now, the amount is 2.59%, right? So if you're contributing 2.59% to those in the hybrid plan, you have to give an equal contribution, 2.59% to those that chose the defined contribution option. So you may, just throwing it out there, you may need to give an increase to both those that are in the hybrid plan as well as those in the defined contribution option. As an example, the state, when they did the salary enhancements this year, they elected not to do the pickup for their public safety officers, the 2.14%. So they gave a salary enhancement of 2.14%, right? Also, the 0.7% for their public employees that occurred. They gave a salary enhancement for that. They're not just giving it to their hybrid employees, they're giving it to all of their tier 2 members, all their tier 2 employees. So just as an example, you may want to make sure that you're giving those increases to both of the members in the hybrid plan defined contribution option, but I'd refer you to your legal counsel, see if that's what should be done in that case. Okay. Just as a side note, and this is something that you may get some questions on come July, right? For those in their first year, even if they chose the defined contribution option, that 401k option, while they are in their first year of employment, that 0.7% will still need to be withheld because they are technically in the hybrid plan for that first year. Once that 1 year is up, we'll switch them over to the 401k option, and their member contributions, what they've contributed, that 0.7%, will be moved to an after-tax fund. Your employer contributions will be moved over to the target date non-vested fund, and will backdate the investments as if the 401k option was chosen from the beginning. Okay. So just something to be aware of if you get questions about that. Every first year employee is defaulted into the hybrid plan. Regardless, in that first year, they are in the hybrid plan until that 1 year is up. And then if they chose, even if it was on day one, the 401k option, will move them after that first year is up. Okay. So 366th day of the year is when we'll move them. And they'll be put into the 401k option as if they chose that for the first year. They're not losing any money because they're contributing basically to themselves into an after-tax fund in the 401k. Okay. All right. Public safety, just want to remind you, if you are doing additional pickups for the public safety, you will need to fill out a new form for to pick up the additional member contributions. Right now, if you selected all when you originally fill out the form, if you don't know, you can contact our employer services department. They can help you with that, but you will need to fill out a new form. If you're increasing the pickup amount, you'll need to fill out a new form. Nothing's changing. If it's still just staying at the 2.59%, you don't have to do anything, but you may want to double check to make sure you're not missing something there with us, and we can help you with that. Okay. But you do have that option to pick up those contributions. That pickup for those in the public safety and firefighter system is a pre-tax amount if the employer picks it up. If the employees pay it, it's after tax. If the employer pays it, it's a pre-tax amount. Okay. So I'm going to move on to another subject here, specifically with one of the bills that did pass that relates to retirement. As many of you are probably aware, there have been tons of bills over the years related to post-retirement reemployment. Representative Gwynn ran a bill this year, and it took a lot of work. on his part, he did a lot of homework, and I know Representative Acton worked on this. Um, there were a couple other legislators that worked closely on this with Representative Gwynn. But basically, beginning on July 1st, there is going to be a new July 1st of 2025, excuse me. So it's not for another year. Okay. And that's on us. That's on us at URS because we're in the process, as many of you know, we're in the process of updating our record keeping system and should be ready to go hopefully July 1st, 2025. So we didn't want to, as we're building this system, have any issues as we switch over. So this is a new option beginning July 1st of 2025. It allows for employees to return to work after a 90-day separation. There's a couple of things that are going to happen. First of all, employers are going to have to pay the full contribution rate, just like any other employee, okay, on those that return to work after under this provision, okay, after they've retired. Those retirees that come back to work, they can still collect their retirement benefit, but there's going to be a reduction, a small reduction. If they're in the public safety or firefighter system, there's going to be a 15% reduction. If they're in the public employee system, there's going to be a 20% reduction to their benefit while they're back at work. Once they stop their employment, they can continue their full benefit. Okay. Rehired retirees also do not receive any cost of living increases during the time while they are reemployed. And depending on the system, that can be up to 2.5% or 4%. But they won't receive any of those during that time that they're reemployed. Okay. So, and they're not going to get those back either. They lose those for those years that they're reemployed. So this is a new option that is going to be made available July 1st of 2025. We're still kind of coming up with the process and how that's going to work on our end from an administrative perspective. But just so you have that kind of as a back pocket item to say, hey, if you're retiring next year, you can come back after 90 days, right? It makes it available. There still has to be that bona fide termination. There can't be any prearrangements or anything like that, but it is again an option. So it does add to our list of things that you can utilize, that you'd be able to utilize to bring retirees back in-house if you need to. So it's adding a sixth door, if you will, right? To be able to do that. There's still the 1 year separation that will be available to them where there's no reduction in the benefit. They'll just be able to keep their monthly retirement allowance and may return to work. There's still the 60-day option, which allows them to have an annual pay limit. So they can't receive pay. The new number in 2024, I think, is about 20,500 right now. So that did increase. I didn't update that number on this slide, but that did increase a little bit. So they can come back part-time with no benefits. Those are kind of the three big ones that they'll be able to choose from. Okay. So with that being said, I know I was short, but I want to make sure I'm answering all your questions here. If you do have questions that aren't answered here, I just want to give you my phone number. You're welcome to reach out to me or email me. I'd be happy to help you answer any questions that you might have. You can also reach out to our employer services department, and they can assist you as well. So, Molly, with that, what kind of questions do we have here?
Excellent. Thanks, Corey. So we have a few questions back to that tier 2 employee pickup. So the first is from Kyler Ludwig is, could we do a one-time bonus check that accounts for all the increased costs?
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be an option that may work because you're not increasing their wages, right? Their salary. But what I would suggest and is that you talk to your legal team with your city. The reason why is because I want to make sure I'm not missing something. If they have any questions, and they want to, because there are some some privileges that attorneys have, right? They can call one of our attorneys. And I can give you their name and their phone number if you want at some point in time. If you want to email me if they have any questions, but Liza Eves is the attorney that's been working on this, and she can kind of help walk through it with your attorney to kind of make sure that you're not bridging any gap or breaking any rules or anything like that on that side of things. So it appears like it will work to do a one-time bonus, um, just because it's not anything that you're having to pay FICA tax or having to worry about, because it is designated as a one-time thing, right? But I would double check with your attorney on that.
Right. And then another question along those lines is, would it, if it's worded as a stipend and not a salary increase, would that be okay?
Yeah, and that's where you start getting into some really gray area.
Mhm.
Um, my suggestion there is to have your attorney talk to Liza here
Okay,
at our office, just because it does get pretty gray. You're having to pay FICA taxes, right? You're having to do all that on those wages, the stipend. So if you got to be really careful, I guess, is what I would say on that.
perfect. Another question is, and I think I think it ties into the other. I just want to make sure I'm covering them all. Again, like a lump sum one-time bonus that covers the 0.7 would be okay. So we covered that. I have a question here. Will we receive these slides? We are recording this and we'll post it on YouTube. And we can work with Corey to get these slides to you as well, if he's all right with that.
Yeah.
So another question is, would you say a one-time bonus could be given to just the hybrid tier two employees, or would you also have to give it to the direct contribution employees as you would a salary increase?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, I'm going to point you to your legal counsel on that one, just because it is something that you want to look at from a fairness perspective.
Mhm.
And if you're looking at total compensation, right? Are you incentivizing someone to take the hybrid plan over the 401k option, right? And so you got to be considerate of that. I know we're all looking at budgets and trying to save money where we can, but I just say be careful and talk to your legal counsel to make sure you're not discriminating against someone that chose the 401k option over the hybrid option, right?
Excellent. Next question. If the employer elects to pick up the public safety EE contribution, and in the future the rate were to go down, would the required amount the employer must pay, would that go down as well?
Yeah, so this is all of these questions relate to your relationship with the IRS as a city, right? And let me just preface it by that, because we're kind of a third party in this whole thing. We're just trying to make sure you're aware of some of the circumstances that may occur with the IRS based on their guidance. So, with that being said, um, God, my mind just went totally blank. I apologize. Um, with that being said, I would just um, make sure that you know that you're going to need to probably talk to your legal counsel about some of these things. Um, Molly, would you repeat that question one more
Yes,
time?
absolutely.
I'm
So it
sorry.
was, yeah. So if the employer elects to pick up the public safety contribution,
Hmm.
and in the
Yeah,
future the rate were to go down, would the required amount that the employer must pay go down with that as well?
yeah. So thank you. Sorry. Um, with that preface in mind of what I said, that relationship between you and the IRS, and you'll need to talk to your legal counsel about these things. But from what we're seeing on our side is that if those rates were to decrease and you said, okay, we're going to pick up that full 18.73% for your public safety or firefighter members, right? And then the rate goes down to say 18%. Are you on the hook for the 18.73? No, not if the rate is 18%. So you'd pay the 18%. Now, if the rate went up to 18.73% again or above that, you could be on the hook. You would be more than likely have to pay the 18.73%, and you can determine if you want to go above that if that happens. Okay. But as we see it, if there's a reduction in the rate, you're only going to be on the hook for the amount that's due. But you're going to need to know that because of that irrevocable decision of the pickup, you may have to pick that up later if it does go up again.
Excellent. Okay, and then we have another one. So if your contribution rate management slide appears to show that rates will be gradually decreasing and in about 2024 will be near zero. What contribution rates does this slide apply to? The employee and employer contribution rate, including amortization? Question mark.
So really, this could apply to all rates. We're actually seeing that if we get to say our goal is to be about 110% funded, okay, for each of the systems. So non-contributory system, tier one non-contributory, tier one public safety, tier one firefighter, tier two, public employee, tier two, public safety and firefighter. Our goal is to be 100%, 110% funded there. Okay. By statute, we don't have to lower those rates until we get to 110% funded. But there comes a point in time when if we get so well funded, it basically feeds on itself. Okay. And so that's why we're seeing kind of this potential drop off in contributions to where there really wouldn't be too much. Now, with that being said, we're seeing also a decline in the membership in tier one as well, right? And so those rates are eventually going to go away because our membership's going down. It's a long time away. Okay. But what we're just trying to do is prevent that big cliff, right? We want to make sure we're doing it prudently in a way that you're going to get those contribution rates back if and when we get to 110% funded, or before that. The goal is to get there to 110% down the road. So I hope that explains it a little better. But the idea is that we want to make sure that we're sitting about 110% funded. So if there is some fluctuations in the market, we'll still remain above that 100% mark, right? That's the idea.
Excellent. From what I see, we've answered all the questions in the chat and the Q&A box. If there's any other questions, please feel free to enter them. And if not, we can wrap this up and give you all some time back.
Yeah.
So will a recording of this be sent to everyone, Adam? A recording will probably not be sent to everyone, but we will post it on the league's YouTube page once we're able to process it, cut it, and get it online. So it will be available on our YouTube page, and I believe we'll send it out the link in Friday Facts. So if you're signed up for Friday Facts, which I encourage you all to do, then you'll get it there. Perfect. Well, with that, Corey, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. For those of you tuning in online, we would encourage you to continue to participate with the league. We have LPC coming up on May 20th. We also have an LAA webinar on May 29th, looking at some HR basics for those involved with the local administrative advisor program. And then we also have our regional events coming up at the end of May. We'll be in Southeastern Utah on May 20th, in R6 on May 21st, Five County May 22nd, and up in Bear River on June 5th. As I mentioned, if you aren't already signed up for Friday Facts and League emails, please do so. And again, thanks for joining us today and everything you do to make cities work. Have a good day.